Lemon Amiga present. A Playguide video review. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi there, once again for another Lemon Amiga play guide and review. This time we'll be checking out the 1992 game No Second Prize, released by The Lion Software. The main designer in this case was Eric Simon, who designed most of The Lion's games, as well as the 7 Gates of Jumbala for Grand Slam in 1989. The coder was Chris Jungen. This was his only coded game on the Amiga. The graphics were created by Thorsten Mucho, who worked on A320 Airbus in 1991 and went on to Amber Moon in 93, and the music was Matthias Steinwachs, who also worked on Amber Moon, Lionheart and The Misadventures of Flink in 1995. To begin, we see the menu of the game, and from here we can check out the lap info of the 20 tracks contained within No Second Prize. From here we can check out the details of each track, including the length and some information about each one, should we wish to do so. And this is just a little extra info of the game, and if we want to check out our lap records, the computer will also memorise those, but we have to select those from a different option on the menu. We can have up to 3 old-time lap records, which will measure 5 laps of that track, or we can have 1 all-time lap record there, you can see at the bottom. And so it is great that the game saves those statistics, and we can also load and save a season. For this we will start a brand new season, and you can see 6 other drivers are available to choose from the go. Each of these 6 drivers will have their pros and cons. Some will be able to curve quickly and drive around corners more quickly than others. Some will have a higher top speed. Fabrizio Adorno is a good compromise for beginners, and we can even change the player's name there in full season mode. So let's just enter my name, and from there we can also select the tracks which we should wish to race. We have to select those in order if we are playing the season, and so let's select the first track, and for this we can either select manual or automatic gears. The automatic is best for beginners, and we can also adjust our mouse sensitivity. No Second Prize is played using the mouse, and so if you have a fast DPI, high DPI mouse, you'll find this all the more playable. You can see this is being played on an Amiga 3000, and the Amiga 3000 25MHz certainly eats this game for breakfast, and you will find no graphics glitches on this game. What you will find is immense speed, even with this average medium player of Adorno, and he is certainly not the fastest one on the track, and nor does he have the fastest acceleration. But you can see the aim of the season mode is to become the first player to cross that line after completing 5 laps of each circuit, and the first player to do so will gain the maximum points, and so on down the line. If you are last, i.e. in 6th place, then you will gain -1 point, and that certainly harms a season. So the aim of this game is to get through the other drivers as quickly as possible, and you can see I'm already in position 1, and so all we have to do is to cruise our way to the finish, not make any mistakes, and that is a surefire way to win each round. Each track is definitely not easy, and you can see one crash there is enough to knock us off and to put us in last place. Each of the 6 drivers we saw on the options menu are driving in this race, and the one that we choose in this case is the orange driver, and so we can see on the map there, we can see we are last. And while we catch up to those computer control players, we can also find drones on the track. You can see grey and brown drivers there. They are repetitive drones, and they have very limited AI compared to the main CPU drivers. But getting past those is not hard as long as you veer away from the racing line, and certainly those computer control players will always stick to the racing line, so as long as we can manoeuvre around those, we won't have too many of those crashes, which, as you can see, slow the player down. We can see 2 damage meters on the bottom right of that screen. The top one represents us, and that is player damage, and the bottom one represents the bike damage. If any one of those meters escapes the top, then we are going to have to escape, and that is basically race over. But while we are still alive and the bike is in good condition, we can continue. Fortunately, that damage does not have any effect whatsoever on our driving ability, and even if our player is next to death and our bike is virtually in pieces, we can still continue at full speed, and that will not harm our chances. We also get the fastest lap after every lap, and you can see the helicopter on the horizon there that always flies above the player in first place. So let's just get past him and take the first position. That is really all there is to do in the season mode. Once we are in first place, no more mistakes ensures us the lap. So even if we are slow avoiding these other drivers, mistakes are the only thing to be avoided. Otherwise, you'll find it is pretty easy. In fact, I must say at this stage that the computer control players are not hard to beat at all. And even if we go off on the first couple of laps, it is still possible to catch up those guys and to win that race. But there are always difficult sections on every course, and this is no exception. We must glide through this section at high speed, and if we crash, well, that is a detriment to our race time. We can also find on this second section here one direct crash to those guys on the racing line, and that severely hampers our chances. So let's take a speed run at this game on this level, playing on the Amiga 500 7MHz machine. And you can see that also fixes a problem with the sun, which is no longer glitching. So we can see the speed of the A500 machine at full speed is very smooth and very fast indeed. In fact, it is comparable to the Amiga 3000, except for a little less smoothness. On the pull record circuit, perhaps the hardest aspect is to have a nice easy drive and a fast exit from the final corner. And if we can do that, then we will be full speed on the line, and that will mean we can go for a fast timed lap. So let's get in there nice and tight, and we will find, well, we touched the grass there, which shaved off a few seconds off our time, and that scored us a 1:53.1. But let's go for a speed run on this track and see if we can't get this nailed down. To gain the fastest single lap on any track, there are a number of things we have to observe. First of all, do not touch the grass, because this will wipe our top speed down just a fraction. And second of all, we must take all these fast corners at top speed without slowing down as much as possible. You saw there I lost some speed on the slide around that corner, but ordinarily you must take that full speed without releasing the trigger. And acceleration in this game is accomplished by holding down the right mouse button, and the brake can be accessed by pressing the left mouse button. The mouse controls in this game are very fluid and very tight, and I couldn't imagine playing this on anything other than mouse, because that gives the player the analog controls they need to lean around these corners. So let's see if we can lean around the final bend, and well, cut that a little too early there, and so that has lost us a little speed. The fastest track lap record that I've seen on this track is actually a 1:46.6. So let's see if we can weave our way through to the line, and let's see how close we can get to that 1:46. Well, we scored a 1:52, which is not incredible. Let's return ourselves to the multiplayer game, where I'm actually getting pretty bored of leading the rest of the field, and if we press escape, then we will quit the lap. We will automatically come in last. This means we are now unable to gain points, and the first 3 positions gain those points. Position 4 and 5 gain 0, and position 6 gives us -1. And the table of records is held, and we can also save that game after any race, but unfortunately we only have 5 saves, and once we go over those 5 saves we can no longer save, so it is important to save reasonably in order to get us through the championship. Luckily, these first few tracks are relatively easy and contain very few obstacles. In fact, the hardest part of these tracks is basically avoiding those sharp corners. On this track, it is very easy to get around those computer control players, and once we have done so, the rest of the track is very easy. In fact, we can go around this entire track in 6th gear, and as long as we don't crash, we can floor it all the way around, and we won't suffer any more problems. Because the easy computer controlled AI can easily be beaten, by the time we get past those, it is a very easy drive to the line, and perhaps that is one of the faults of the game, that the computer controlled AI to a reasonable player, to a semi-pro, is so easy to beat that the game becomes too easy and a borderline joke, which is a shame, because the competitiveness of the season should be difficult, and these computer control players shouldn't be so hard to beat, but at the same time they shouldn't be so easy that they are a pushover and we can lap those after just half a lap or at least a few bends. So that is a 1:12.4 scored by me. So let's switch over to single player mode, and let's switch to driver to Michelle, because Michelle is actually the one with the fastest cornering speed of them all, and her acceleration isn't bad, and her top speed is faster than Adiono as well, which means there are absolutely no drawbacks to choosing Michelle. In fact, Michelle is probably the fastest and the best player in the entire game. In fact, I would not choose any other driver above Michelle, and even Adiono can't take these corners at this speed because he hasn't got Michelle's top speed of 329, and he can't take those corners because his cornering ability is rather poor, which makes this track, where every single corner must be driven flat at high speed, choosing any other driver over Michelle on this course means it is simply harder to beat, and the driver will have a much harder time trying to get through those corners and getting that fast time. So that's a 51.9. Let's see if we can improve that with a speed run. When the map flashes there, it means we have driven 4 laps and we are on our 5th and final lap. When we complete this, it will mean race over, and if we are in season mode, it means points are distributed, and if we are in single player mode, it will mean the best times are listed on screen. So here we go in single player mode, taking these end bends very, very easily indeed, negotiating all these other players and taking it as smoothly as possible, because if we screech those tyres we will be losing time, and so maximum must be maintained. The highest top speed that I've seen on this course is actually a 51.4 second lap. That is a 51.5, 1/10 down on the fastest lap ever. Circuit number 3 is Knutford, and Knutford is slightly in the shape of a cat, and the cat's tail is probably the hardest section to beat. All the rest are relatively easy. So let's set off in single player practice mode and see if we can't beat this track and get a fast time. Even though there is no in-game music, the title music is well done and certainly sticks in the mind. What we have in-game are a range of sound effects, and we can certainly hear those other opponent bikers materializing on the horizon and slowly winding their way into the foreground thanks to a very nice sound effect. And even our own biker makes a noise, and the crashes are pretty clangy as well. So the range of sound effects on offer when we are travelling at high speed is very nice. So those sound effects really do give us a great sense of speed on this game and really help give us a thrill ride. Again, on this course, the hardest section is to complete the penultimate corner fast, and then we can have a nice drive, a fast exit towards the line. If we brake and drop below a certain speed, the automatic gearbox will automatically drop us into 5th, and that is the gear we need to accelerate and speed over the line. If we have the manual gearbox, we can simply brake quickly and select 5th, and the bike will naturally slow down and it will speed up again as soon as you hit that power button. Even though the accelerator is a simple on-off affair, it doesn't hamper this game, and having analog controls on the power and the brakes certainly doesn't harm it, because, well, the mouse is more than capable at driving this game, and the power can be feathered on and off by quickly pressing the fire button on and off. And if we release power for a second, that will give us even more drive and even more turning ability on those corners. So if we find ourselves slipping off like this, simply release the power, and because we are in 5th gear, well, that shaves some speed off as well. And as soon as we are above 300 kilometers per hour in this bike, we can gear up to 5th, and that was a 54.4, which is not 53.7, which was the fastest. So some way off the fastest time there. One biker gets in our way, it's all over. Yes, we have 5 laps and we can write the bike off on lap 1 or lap 5. It doesn't really matter which lap. If we write the bike off, then we've written off the entire race in full season mode, and even with the practice we have written off a chance of completing a lap. And sometimes it is definitely important to have a great final drive off the hardest corner to give ourselves maximum speed. Again, try to slow down and use 5th gear on this very tight hairpin to try and get ourselves around that corner, and then we can floor it all the way to the line. So let's have a look at that time as we drive over the line, and that's 43.2 seconds. Let's see if we can improve upon that time. And this course reminds me of a golf club. It is very easy, and we are just going to speed our way to the hardest parts because the rest can be driven at full speed pretty obviously. And the courses in this game really do introduce the driver to the easy courses first of all, and they get progressively slightly harder as the game progresses, although as we shall see at the end, the very hard courses aren't too bad at all. And that's a 42.7 when we could have scored a 41.3. On to the next one, which is Wadesden or Wadston perhaps, and this track is shaped like a giant F, so the back straight, the home straight is very easy. The difficult sections are in the middle. There are many ways for the driver to negotiate these corners. The first way is to select the best driver possible, which is Michelle, and she can navigate these corners much easier than the faster yet more difficult to turn players. So that's one tip. Another tip is to press the brake and then back on the fire very quickly. You will hear the bike skid momentarily, and that will lose a modicum of speed, but when the object of the race is to get in front of those computer control players like this and survive, it really doesn't matter the speed which we travel as long as we don't crash. Just like Test Drive 2 The Duel, as long as we are in front of those other guys, then we can simply cruise our way to the finish, and fastest lap times are there simply for prestige. So let's speed our way through. That's a 108.7, and so my personal best on this course is actually a 52.7. I actually started the recorder on the lap after I scored that 52.7, so unfortunately we cannot beat it on this run, or we will not be able to beat it. But you can see on this track the most important thing is to have a great run on this top section and then drop it down into 5th gear and brake for this second section, and then we can speed up full speed, maximum gear, avoiding all those other riders over the rest. And yes, braking in this game isn't usually recommended unless it's a hairpin, and then sometimes braking has to be done and cannot be avoided. Otherwise, full speed max gear is certainly recommended, and you can usually drive most of the way using that tactic. If in doubt, take the finger off the fire button. So that's a 52.9 and a crash from me. on to the next track. It's Tetbury, and Tetbury is actually shaped like a mini Estoril or a mini Catalunya circuit, in which we ride practically reversed. And so as we set off, we will find only 2 sections which are very difficult on this circuit, and those happen to be towards the end. And as Tetbury is on the end of that final row in the options menu, that means the courses will be getting slightly harder from here on in, and you may notice obstacles appearing on the courses as well. There are a number of obstacles, including jumps and oil, and as long as we don't hit those jumps and oil, then we shouldn't be flying off into the scenery. But the biggest problem on any course is simply avoiding those other riders. We can have a very clean run for 99% of the time, but if we hit the back of one of those other riders at high speed, we've written off our chances. In this section we must hang to the left as far as possible, and then just about here throw it right, and we can grace that bend absolutely no problem. But those other riders on this very difficult section mean that destroys our fastest lap time, and we are no longer able to get to the end of the line. And again, we can see the same corner, we can actually cut the grass, but it doesn't make it any easier to get over those difficult obstacles. So we can cut the grass in this game, and we can use the grass to escape those other riders and to avoid bends and cut chunks out of the scenery, but unfortunately that will slow down the bike, and so it makes these bends even more difficult if you end up swerving and touching the grass, because then you'll have to drag the bike all the way back, and then you'll have to overtake some more riders. Luckily, in the one-player mode, there are no other riders except for these drones, and again, they don't really make life too difficult unless you get one of those on the hardest bend of them all, which is signalled by these lorries on the right there. Again, left-hand side, and throw it right at the last moment, top gear, and oh, just waited too long there. Can we make it? And no. We crashed. That's the end of the lap. That's the end of the track. It's certainly easy to write that bike off, and so nothing else can be done except to start again. Let's get back to the menu and select no opponents for the next track. And I'm going to use the manual gearbox here with Michelle. Michelle is the green rider, so her dash will always be green if you are playing Michelle. And I'd certainly recommend Michelle for Cadwell Park, mainly because these bends are very sharp later on, and if you choose any other rider, you'll find negotiating these bends at high gear, top speed, very difficult indeed. The hardest bend is probably coming up there. You have to throw it right here and skim through that gap at high speed. If you are a second out either way, you'll crash into the buildings or you will crash off. If you can negotiate that, then this section requires a gear down and then back on the power as soon as you can to avoid those other riders and to make progress. And as soon as those kilometers per hour reach above 300, you can gear up into 6 and hopefully run all the way to the line from here. Yes, these corners are difficult at this stage, and you have to cut those as much as possible and use those at high speed in high gear, and sometimes it is difficult with all these other riders. But let's just run for the line and see what time we made on this lap, and that was a 108.2, which is not amazing given the fastest lap is a 105.4. Let's see if we can make our way closer to that target with another speed run. And once again, the hardest part probably of this entire circuit is weaving between the skyscrapers on this section. Throw it in, and if you hit that mark perfect, then you shouldn't lose an ounce of speed whatsoever. But braking here for this section, and then piling on the pressure straight again, so that it hovers around 280 is probably the best compromise speed, and then you can floor it from here on in all the way to the line. If we find the best average top speed around the fastest corners, then that's probably good enough to make those corners, and if we don't, you can see I slid off there and lost a lot of speed trying to make that second to last corner. So if we can't and we end up spinning our wheels, that means we are losing time. So Let's see what we made of that one. That was a 107.5, which is still not a 105.4, but it is close enough. The mid selection of tracks on that track selection screen there are slightly harder, and we shall see how hard they are. And really, they do not really progress much harder throughout the entire game, and so you won't find these tracks much harder than the ones on the first row. Let's speed off out there and see if this track is actually very tough indeed. And well, we can see there, if we take the first corner nice and easy, it isn't that hard, and even with Adiono, the medium driver, we can still make it. If in doubt, off-roading allows us to take those shortcuts, and again, in an emergency, that's not such a bad feature, because there are very few trackside obstacles we can off-road in this game, and just like Vroom, we can veer off at the last moment and avoid those idiots. And yes, the computer CPU drivers are idiots in this game, and you can see one rider veering into the side of us will write off our chances and crash us into the background, which in this case we have totally crashed, and all we can do is press escape and try a different track. Let's just try the Ladbroke circuit, which is the final one on the middle section, so that should mean a medium circuit, and we can choose one, all or no opponents. For this, let's choose the one opponent, and let's select George for this, which is the blue driver. George is probably the easiest of them all to beat, and so he will not put up much of a fight whatsoever. This circuit opens out with a nice easy run out to the first corner. Unfortunately, that first corner is very sharp and it requires at least braking to get around that thing in one piece. So let's see what we make of it, and braking down there, and whoop, just touch that grass. And certainly competing against another CPU driver adds an extra element to this game. Let's see if we can maintain that speed for this difficult section, and no, we crash again. We should have broke for that section, that particularly sharp corner, but we didn't, and that means the George player has gained an advantage. The oil and the jumps on this course are very easy to navigate around, so they are absolutely no problem. No, the hardest part of this course is navigating around these sharp bends, of which this is the third one. So, do we remember to brake? Well, we actually crash into the back of another rider, which saves us having to brake, and we are the wrong way around on the track. Luckily, we can press the Q key at any point, and that will recenter the bike on the track, and if we drive too far out into the landscape, it will automatically recenter us back on the track. So pressing Q wildly in an emergency can help maintain the challenge, and that can help recover a bad crash. As long as the damage, as you can see there, is on maximum, as long as that damage isn't maxed out any further than that, I won't be killed. Yes, we can still ride unaffected, even if the rider is close to death and the bike is a bag of bolts. We can still continue at full speed. So let's check out the next track. This is one of the harder tracks because this is on the bottom row of that track selection screen. And so against the computer opponents, let's see how hard that would be. Actually, this track is very easy indeed, still, even at this late stage in the game, and these minor oil patches are absolutely nothing to slow us down. The first corner is very easy, and even Adiono takes that full speed, and oh, look at that, random jumps in the road, and well, that slows us all the way down. That's the hardest section of this entire level. It is certainly great that the programmers have thought to include 20 unique tracks into the game, reminiscent of original tracks and actual authentic tracks on the calendar, but unfortunately they are not absolutely authentic and they are only rough guides to the actual tracks, so we can't really compare these to the real tracks. But at least every track is very fast and very smooth on every single Amiga model available, and we can certainly put ourselves through our trials and through our paces and take a few risks in this game. Yes, this game really does love the player who takes risks, and you can get away with blue murder sometimes. Well, sometimes if you touch that grass, you can't. These bends are very easy, and again the hardest part is just avoiding those endless drones which block our way. Sometimes they will veer to the side and ram us off the road, and sometimes they will make very late manoeuvres, and we have to anticipate those and avoid those at all costs. Taking those guys wide is a great idea, but again, if we are aiming for a fast lap time, then all these corners must be cut very tight, just like this. And so each corner cut equals extra seconds and extra time on that high score. So as we gain ourselves into 5th place, and let's start overtaking those riders after at least the first lap, and so we find ourselves in 2nd as we approach the line there, and let's roll off again, taking a shortcut, trying to take that fast yellow rider, and it didn't quite work, and the helicopter speeds into the distance, and we find ourselves back in 3rd. Because this is only the outlap, we can't expect a miraculous time at the end of all this, but what we can get is a rough idea of how to play this level, and this level has been relatively clean so far by me, so let's see the time, 2 minutes 32. Well, that sounds very, very long indeed, but we can shave that time down if we don't make any more crashes. And look at that. Touch that oil there, that will virtually bring us to a standstill, and if we touch a second patch of oil, that will severely hamper our progress, but once again we can always catch up to those other players if we don't make any further mistakes. Let's quit out again and let's try another track. This time we'll choose Silverstone, which should be reminiscent to some people, although they have changed the track layout of Silverstone dramatically since this game was produced. And unlike Silverstone, which is a classic high-speed track, where all the bends must virtually be driven at top speed in high gear, well, in this game, the obstacles mean we cannot avoid all these high-speed bends, because we have to avoid the obstacles and all these other computer-controlled riders. So Silverstone, in this case, is not easy. So let's see how we go on as we approach the first of our traps, and it is oil on the road. Let's veer wide there to avoid all that oil, and there are jumps there, and oh no, we've gone off again. Crash, 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 that's all we do. Well, eventually I managed to get that thing back in a straight line, and avoiding the rest of this oil means, well, difficult times are laying ahead there with all these barriers in the road. Luckily, it doesn't take much imagination to memorise all these obstacles, and a number of laps in will usually mean the player is familiar with the level and they can usually floor it. Unfortunately, we cannot play this game in 2-player mode, we cannot lap link computers together, we cannot power net those together, we cannot play split screen mode, but with 1 player on the go, we can play it with the CPU players, and we can fight against the times and the time trials and the full season. So longevity is there, and certainly playability is there in spades. I remember playing Red Zone and finding the controls terrible. I remember playing all kinds of 3D races on the Amiga and finding the controls absolutely terrible. Of them all, this is probably the best 3D bike racer on the Amiga. It is certainly the fastest of them all, and it is certainly the fastest handling when it comes to these tight corners. So let's make our way over to the line, having achieved 6th place there, having not passed anybody on this track. And the time, well, let's check it out. It's 2 minutes 8 on the outlap. So let's see if we can improve that slightly. Let's speed this up. And again, the hardest part of this course is avoiding all these endless traps. And if you can, you're on for a good time. And if you can't, well, you've written off your chances. So let's choose another track. This is Brands Hatch, and just like Brands Hatch, it is a similar design, but unfortunately, unlike Brands Hatch, it is full of traps and oil. So let's take Michelle out again, and let's see what we make of this. And I'll be playing this track raw and unpracticed, so I have absolutely no idea what to expect on this track. And so this is me crashing incessantly once again. Memory is vital on these courses, and if the player can memorise just where to turn and just how to handle every bend in every situation, accommodating those endless idiots, then they shouldn't find progress too difficult. Certainly the controls are sharp enough, to ensure the player can make progress, and with the sensitivity options on high, they can really throw that bike into the corners at full lock and skid around most things. That is never more helpful than when we are trying to avoid these staggered barriers there, and we can either weave around those or take a shortcut on the grass. It's nice to see those overhead stands there as we drive through at high speed, and all these overhead bridges remind me of Powerdrome, released in 1989 by Electronic Arts, but again, compared to other 3D bike races such as Team Suzuki and Red Zone, The Cycles and The Ultimate Ride, this certainly stands up as the very best 3D bike racing game on the Amiga. Well, proper 3D that is, not 2.5D like Super Hang-On and Prime Mover. Real 3D in this case equates it to F1 GP and Indy 500. And in that respect, I certainly think No Second Prize stands up way above most contenders. No Second Prize was played in November 2013 in the Lemon Amiga vs EAB Super International Games competition, and in that case I didn't come top of the table, but I did do very well. So this game was certainly played to death recently and was enjoyed by all. So let's just speed up this footage yet again to show you Brands Hatch, what Brands Hatch might look like to high speed, and if you avoid all these things, bang, crashed again. If you avoid these things, then it's no problem. I certainly think the programmers and the playtesters did a great job with this game. There are no bugs in this game, nothing that can break and nothing that can go wrong. In fact, the graphics engine is absolutely rock solid. It's a shame that they didn't make any other games with this engine on the Amiga, but what we do have is No Second Prize. That is good enough. That's what we made of that time, 1:35, and you can see me avoiding everything at high speed there. So let's move on, let's select Adio No again, and let's select the penultimate track, which should be pretty hard because it is at the bottom of that track map selection screen, once again with automatic gears. This track is actually the penultimate track of the season, and we are actually playing this in season mode, so we are unable to progress to the next track until we have either quit or completed the previous one. That means I will need to thread my way through all these opponents in order to achieve that. And well, if we can do that on the first lap, then it should make the rest of the laps fairly easy. But again, I am playing this cold. I have not practiced this track, and I have barely seen this track before. So let's try and take it easy and get through it in one piece. The helicopter there gives away the first player, and look at that, taking a skydive there. But you'll notice that does not damage the bike. Let's just do that again a few times. It does not damage the bike, even though we crash land at 100 miles per hour. And terminal velocity doesn't seem to scratch our tyres, but the oil does, and the oil pins us to the ground like concrete, and there's nothing we can do about that. We can just drive out and ride out there and make the best of it. You can see the sun there crashing again because we're playing on the all 30, but let's weave our way through, and oh, just look at that, just about makes it there in 5th gear on that difficult corner. The final corner is also littered with jumps and tall skyscrapers, and the game anticipates you flying into those at high speed, but there is absolutely no slowdown whatsoever, no matter how much scenery there is on the screen. But I'm just going to speed this up slightly anyway, because we are running short of time now to complete this game, and that's a 1 minute 44 second, so let's see if we can improve on that on the next lap. The player will find that on the second lap their tyres are just warming up, and by the third and the fourth lap their tyres are warmer, and this should enable the player to take corners faster. On the last lap the tyres will be at maximum speed, maximum power and maximum temperature, so the player should be able to really floor it round all these difficult corners. The most difficult section of this track is definitely the weaving section, which we are approaching now at high speed. See if we can make it, weave, and oh, not quite slow enough to make the very hardest corner of them all. That definitely requires 1 gear down into 5th, maybe even 4th to take that corner securely. So let's just speed our way back up again and make our way to the finish. Let's see what time we got from that course. each course is relatively varied, and yet most courses are particularly samey. And so once you've mastered one course, you've mastered them all. 127.6, that's not bad for that course. Let's skip on using our Fabrizio Adorno again. Let's choose the last track, and this should be the hardest track of them all. Unfortunately, it isn't, because this track is relatively easy and the other drivers are relatively easy. Again, the hardest part is taking the corners, and once mastered those, the rest should be a doddle. So let's take the first corner very slowly and try and avoid all this oil and all these buildings. Again, I'm playing this level cold, so I have no idea what to expect on this first lap. The most important thing is to stay secure and to not have any crashes. If we complete this level, then we have completed the season. And so if I can show you how to get beyond these computer control players, and well, it's not easy. If I can get past these guys, then that should make that job easier. But I'm going to complete quite a few laps of this Harrogate circuit. In fact, we will complete all 5 laps to try and catch up to those computer control players, and let's see if we can do that. Weave again on the hardest section. If we can weave and take our time. Look at that, computer control player literally eating our tyres, trying to slide underneath us, but that didn't work. Again, those idiots will block us at every opportunity, and sometimes we can drive directly over those like a steamroller. Other times they will veer us off and they will collide into our vehicle, crashing it out into the barriers or giving us a major off. One crash into the back of those guys can absolutely write off the entire game. So if we are quick on the accelerator, we can get past those guys. If we are quick on the brake, just like that, we can outmaneuver those guys. So the rest is up to us. Look at that, weaving around there. The computer control players, the drones weaving twice as much as the actual players, and the actual players actually taking their time through this section. So let's do likewise and survive. You can see the green computer control player has extended a vast lead over the others, and I'm still struggling to get beyond the yellow driver, because the yellow driver seems to have extra turbo there, which I do not have. In general, I'd say no second prize plays very fairly and doesn't usually give the player too much to worry about, except if they collide into the scenery and those other drivers. But sometimes the yellow driver there is difficult to overtake, and now that we've overtaken that rider, it is going to take a vast effort and sheer speed for us to catch up. And look at that, the yellow computer control player there collided into us, smashed into the side on a dodgy overtaking manoeuvre. But if we are smooth through these final bends, that's a 112.3. Let's see if we can improve on that. If we are smooth through these corners, then that should help us at every stage. And again, kid gloves there with that difficult corner. Don't touch any of that oil. And when was the last time oil slowed something down to a dead stop? Those oil patches are more like pits of glue, and if you get into those, well, it is hard and sometimes a long, tedious slog out, so always best avoided. So I'm trying to pull out all the stops here, and by the 3rd lap, which we are on at the moment, I have begun to memorise this course, and so driving through these things at high speed is becoming easier with every lap. Unfortunately, we are struggling to gain that high speed. Look at that, straight through those things. We're struggling to get to that 300 magic barrier, and that will give us the edge over those other riders. And if we are not at 300 kilometers per hour, then we will probably not catch up to those guys. And if we are over that amount, then we'll probably start to make a few gains. But a few dodgy corners later, that's a 1080, and we are still not catching up to that guy. This is lap 4. And so we have to make sure that we get these corners and the idiots in the way don't wreck our chances. And so let's veer our way. Very lucky there, squeeze in between those gaps. And yes, the player can be extremely lucky playing this game. So extremely lucky that it borders on miraculous sometimes. But again, if you weave in front of opponents, or the opponents weave in front of you at just at the wrong time, then the game may appear unfair, and those computer control players can appear unfair if you get on the wrong side of them, so always give the opponents a wide berth. straight through that section at top speed there, and we are only just behind the lead. Can we make it? Can we? Oh, look at that. Yet again, the computer control player determined to throw me off. I wasn't for having it, but that has reduced my top speed, and that means we are now unable to catch up to position number 1. Oh, look at that. Straight there, just avoid the barriers, but we cannot catch up to number 1 now because, well, he's too far in front, but we're going to give it another college try. That was a 1 minute 11.1. We are flashing, which means this is the last lap. Kid gloves once again through the first corner, and the rest can be done virtually flat out from here. I think besides no sky textures and no textures anywhere on this entire game, I still consider No Second Prize as a digital 3D masterpiece. For its day, the speed was breathtaking, the playability and the handling was absolutely immaculate and still remains so to this day. The graphics are very fluid and very fast, and even though they are sparsely drawn, they are absolutely fluid and fast, so that's all you can hope for on the Amiga. I particularly like the music and the sound effects, and the playability certainly stands up. So, taking a look at the scores, Amiga Format gave this 80%, Amiga Power gave it 84%, Amiga Computing gave this 90%, CO Amiga gave it 90%, Amiga Action gave No Second Prize 91%, and the One gave it 91% in April 1992, saying this was the fastest, smoothest and the most playable first-person racing game on the Amiga. They compared this to F1 GP and Indy 500, which we saw just a few weeks ago, and they said that this was a beater on the Amiga and probably the best bike racing game they had ever played. So let's take a look at the fastest player of them all. Ray Turner has the best acceleration and the fastest vehicle, and let's select manual gearbox and Hockenheim for this, and let's just say this is the final track which I'll be showing you in this play guide. Hockenheim is probably more difficult than the last 2 tracks put together because of all the trackside obstacles which they will find on the track, but apart from that, I found No Second Prize is very easy to the novice, very comfortable to memorise, and if the player goes off, then they certainly know it's their fault. If in doubt, the player can press the keys on the keyboard. The number 4 key will take us to the helicopter cam, and the helicopter always flies above the first place rider, and from here we can see us, the yellow player, actually going off wildly. Pressing the 3 key will give us a distance replay from a camera angle further back, and pressing the 2 key will actually give us a closer camera replay, and we can also press the 1 key to return to our driver view. We can also press space to return back to play at any point, and so highlights can be reviewed just like Indy 500 from multiple angles, and as far as I know they cannot be saved to disk, but replaying highlights once again was a unique feature, not something that we ever experienced in the likes of Lotus or Prime Mover for example, but certainly replays broke new ground in its day, and it's always nice to see those Indy 500 rip-off elements. And look at that, drove straight over the bike there. So let's see that again. Let's press the keys on the keyboard and we can see a replay. We can press the 2 key there, which gives us a closer look, and look at that bike recentering on the track there. And let's have a look. This is the bike that we went straight over. Let's see that again. Well, sometimes it's as easy as that in this game, but most of the time it isn't. But those replays there add extra value to this game, and I certainly recommend this game highly enough for those racing pros who enjoy going around circuits at high speed. So that's just about it from me. I hope you enjoyed a play guide review to the 1992 game No Second Prize. It doesn't help with me crashing incessantly, but I hope you've got an idea of the game, and look at that, that's the tree from the intro sequence. So thank you again for viewing this play guide, and I hope to see you again sometime soon. Thank you.